Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this early morning, middle of the night bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click the bell icon. And folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They definitely do matter, and they are appreciated. And with that, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this early morning or middle of the night bonus upload, shall we?
Today's first encounter. I first ran into the Dogman in Hancock County, Mississippi when I was 9 years old, then again at 17. And it made me feel as though something was always watching me whenever I got the courage to go back into the woods. You may or may not know what a vortex howler is, but I was in a field with my dad that was walking distance from our home, tossing the thing around. If you don't know what a vortex howler is, it's a small football with a tail and these little holes that cause it to make this cool whistling noise when it sails through the air. I probably sound like a salesperson as I write this, but the toy's a lot of fun. I wonder if they still make them. My dad and I were doing this thing where we were testing how far we could throw the vortex. My small arm couldn't throw it anywhere near as far as he could, and it was so much fun for me to watch how high and how far he could make it fly. I had basically assumed the role of being the dog during this activity, running to fetch it wherever it landed, just so he could throw it again. It was probably after 10 or so throws that it landed right near the edge of the forest. Once I made my way over to the woods, it was right before I was about to grab the vortex that I saw it. What was only probably a few yards into the woods was what I initially thought to be a very tall adult in a costume. The only reason why I thought that was because it was standing on two legs, just like a human. But I think it was when I saw the shape of the legs that even at such a young age, I was able to establish it couldn't be a human. Although the tall animal was silent while it stared at me, I could see its diaphragm inhaling and exhaling, as well as its muscular arms hanging, twitching. The shaking of its arms is always one of the first things that pops into my mind when I think back to that encounter with the Dogman. I only got the smallest glimpse of its face since I was already terrified by the time that I looked up at it. It was standing in the shade, and all I really remember about it was that it had pointed ears and a wet snout full of sharp teeth. It truly did look something straight out of nightmares. Even though I was so young and had no experience with anything like it, my instincts told me to take slow steps backward without making any major commotion. But it was when I felt that I was a good distance away from the wood's edge that I turned and sprinted toward my dad. When I got over to him, he smiled at me and chuckled because he probably assumed that I was startled by something small, like a snake or a spider. Understandably, he didn't take me too serious when I told him what I saw. I'm a bit embarrassed to say that I stood behind my dad as I looked towards the forest. There was nothing in sight. When my dad started walking toward the area to grab the football, I remember I was holding on to his arm, desperate to prevent him from going near the Dogman. He assumed that I had either imagined what I saw or had confused some normal animal for a monster. How can I blame him? That's exactly how I would have acted if I had never before seen anything like that. Much too frightened to go any further, I decided to stay put while he made his way to the football. As he glanced into the woods, his casual body language communicated that there was nothing unusual still standing over there. Still, as he was making his way back toward me, I was so goddamn worried that the Dogman was going to burst out of the forest and pounce on him from behind. Although that it seemed the coast was now clear, I insisted that we headed home, and my dad obliged. I remember how even in the car ride home, my body was still shaking. It felt as though my mind was so badly wanting to forget what I had seen. Nothing further came of that sighting, and as the years went on, it steadily faded towards the back of my brain. For some reason, I'm willing to bet that whistle from the Vortex Howler played a big role in attracting the Dogman to the park. Sure, it could have already been in the area, but the noise those toys make are so unique that I could see it perking the interest of any wildlife nearby. As I stated before, my second encounter with the Dogman happened when I was 17 years old and a senior in high school. We still lived in the same town and in the same house. I had my high school sweetheart, Erin, over, and we were watching a movie in the dark. I remember it was a thunderstorm because I kept anticipating the power to go out. My parents were on vacation for their anniversary, and looking back on it, they sure did put a lot of trust into their only child not to throw a huge party. There was one point when Erin got up to use the bathroom, and I heard her scream. I assumed that she had spotted a mouse. We were constantly dealing with mice infestations while I was growing up, but that was far from the case. She didn't respond when I asked her whether she saw a rodent. Instead, I got up from the sofa and walked into the hallway. She ran right into me. She was petrified. I thought I could hear her heart beating through her chest. When I grabbed onto her shoulders, I noticed she was shaking uncontrollably. She was in awe. She kept pointing down the hallway, but seemingly couldn't catch her breath, that she needed to get words out about what she had seen. Heck, I was starting to think that she had seen a ghost. I had heard strange noises while growing up in that house, and considering that we weren't the first residents to live there, it always seemed like a possibility that there could be spirits roaming around. She just kept pointing down the hallway, and finally, she said the word wolf a couple of times. Honestly, at that time, the notion seemed far stranger to me than ghosts. I can't say whether anyone had ever had trouble with wild wolves in the community, but I had certainly never heard anything about them. My only conclusion was that some large dog might have gotten loose and wandered up to the window while my girlfriend was in the bathroom. Of course, since it was storming, the atmosphere could have made a sudden sighting of any animal that much more frightening. At this point, the animal that I saw when I was a child was not at the forefront of my mind. Erin explained it to me that when she lifted the toilet seat, that lightning lit up the area, and she briefly saw Wolf looking through the small circular window on her right side. It was when she made eye contact with the animal that she had screamed. When I entered the bathroom, I approached the window, but I saw nothing. It then occurred to me that it would have had to have been a massive dog, something the size of a mastiff, perched up on two legs to be able to look through that window from the outside. I was inclined to think that Erin might have imagined whatever she thought she had seen, and that was when my childhood encounter dawned on me. I immediately started to think about how dismissive my dad was when I told him about the Dogman. Still, I found the idea of Erin seeing the Dogman around my property before I ever saw or heard any sign of it incredibly slim. I continued to brush it off, and being the eager teenager boy that I was, I wanted to move on to the subject and return to the sofa. It was maybe an hour later that Our makeout session was interrupted by a sound of something scratching on one of the nearby windows. Aaron started getting scared again and repeated how the wolf was back. It was too dark to see anything outside, and when I heard the noises again, this time coming from a different window, I jumped up and flipped on the outside lights. That's when I saw it. The sight caused me to freeze up, a real trip down memory lane. About 10 feet away from the living room patio was what my mind told me to be the same exact animal that I saw when I was a 9-year-old boy. To me, it looked like one of those lichens from the Underworld movies, only the snout wasn't as elongated. Its snout was a lot like what you see on a baboon, but everything else about it looked like the combination of a man and a wolf. "Do you see it?" Aaron murmured from the sofa. "Do you see it?" The animal wasn't looking at me when I first went to the window, but it soon turned its head and we locked eyes. The way it looked at me haunts me. If it was the same animal, it was like it was intelligent enough to remember me, even after all those years. "It's out there, isn't it?" Aaron said. "I told you. What should we do?" The way she said that made it clear that she knew we weren't dealing with anything remotely close to an ordinary animal. The tone of her voice emphasized that we were dealing with a true monster. At first, I was inclined to call the police, or at least animal control. However, there was this nagging part of me that warned I could very easily be setting someone up for their unexpected demise. Just by looking at that creature, you knew it could inflict fatal damage with minimal effort. There was no question that it could dominate even the largest land predators, such as a grizzly or polar bear. Also, I think I didn't want to risk my parents getting notified that the police or authorities were there. I just wanted to keep everything as cool as possible so that they wouldn't second guess leaving me in the house alone. I had Aaron hold my hand and we walked to the garage where I quickly and quietly grabbed an aluminum baseball bat. After I brought her back over to the sofa, I stepped back over to the window where I last spotted that Dogman, and it was nowhere in sight. Aaron and I had laid on the couch for the remainder of the night, also spooked to do much of anything. I remember how the next morning she had a bit of a rough time coming up with an excuse to give to her parents as to why she never made it home. I never saw the Dogman again after that night. I didn't tell too many people those experiences. It also makes me wonder how many strange things happen to people on this earth every day. All of those reports must make up the tiniest fraction of what truly goes on out there. Howdy everyone, my name's Andrew, and I'm from a very rural town in Oklahoma, known as Carmen. I'm 24 years old now, and this happened 2 years ago, so I was 22. There isn't a whole lot going on in my hometown, so when there's something that causes the tiniest bit of excitement, it feels like the entire town gets involved. The town started getting all worked up once domesticated dogs started to disappear from their properties. It was always that they were left to roam their respective yards, and it seemed like they ended up vanishing into thin air. There were never any bodies found, which led a lot of people to believe that someone was going around stealing dogs that they suspected might have been abused and needed a better home. But it got to the point where it started happening so regularly that the theory started to dissolve. The population of pets were dropping so rapidly that people who still did have their dogs started to keep them inside nearly 24 hours a day. I remember how there was one man who claimed he saw the devil leap into his neighbor's yard and snap their dog's neck and then run off with the body in an instant. There were a handful of very religious folks who seemed to believe this claim. However, many others began to acknowledge him as little more than a crazy old man. Sometimes in the middle of the night, you would be woken up by a rifle firing. It wasn't like that you'd never heard that before. After all, coyotes did frequent the area, and sometimes folks would fire a shot off into the air to scare them away. But it started happening at such a high rate that people who never had any dogs of their own, started to complain about all the noise. The disappearances of these dogs created so much of a controversy amongst the residents within the town. The mystery had gone on for so long that there became this unwritten rule of refraining of speaking about it. Unfortunately, that didn't prevent the horror from continuing. I had this one close friend, Kirsten, who had become very intrigued in the matter. She was this cool butch individual who shared many of the same interests as me while growing up. She called me over one day because she claimed to have seen the animal that she suspected to be responsible for the dog abductions. She had been trying to capture both photographs and footage of the animal, but as you might expect, it never really worked out. Kirsten invited me over to her place one night to kick it and wait for the animal to appear. I remember I wasn't all that interested for whatever reason, but she was able to persuade me with a 6-pack of beer. Shortly after I arrived, I watched Kirsten's older brother place a bunch of raw strip steak in various places around their backyard. The three of us had a good time that night, but saw nothing. I believe it was the following weekend when I went back and did a similar routine, only this time her brother thought it would be a better idea to hang meat from a few of the large trees that you could see from their backyard. We had a few beers and were sitting around in a space near one of the windows that was lit by nothing more than a few candles. It wasn't even that late in the night that we saw a movement near the trees. At first I thought we were looking at a mere coyote, a large one, but a coyote nonetheless. But it was when we watched it stand up on 2 feet and extend an arm way above its head to grab a piece of that strip steak that I knew this was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Kirsten's brother Jim explained that he hung the meat high up there so that it would instantly prove that this was no normal dog. Unlike other encounters I've heard and read, this creature didn't appear overly muscular or anything like that. From where we were sitting, I don't think it was any larger than the average adult man. Because of all the other reports talking about how massive these things get, I wouldn't be at all surprised if we were looking at a juvenile. In the way that almost makes it more frightening. If it was a juvenile that was capable of capturing and likely consuming that many dogs, imagine what a full-grown adult dogman was capable of. I'd never seen one of those, and I certainly hope I never do. We watched the supposed juvenile animal for a few minutes before it scampered away. Each of us was shooting footage and snapping photos with our phones. But all of it was too dark to use as proof. Jim didn't set up any lights near the tree at the time because he had convinced himself that the light setup would drastically decrease the chances of being able to attract the animal. So the animal was there biting at the meat for a few minutes and sniffing around the area before it eventually wandered back off into the dark. It wasn't much longer after that people seemed to stop seeing this creature, and the remaining dogs stayed out of harm's way. I'm sure a lot of that is because people were exercising caution, keeping their dogs close and inside most of the time. Therefore, the animal might have become discouraged by the lack of available food compared to what once was there and decided to move on to a different area. I strongly believe that it was a rare type of hominid that I saw that night. But there are a few people that I knew who were very convinced that they're spirits of some kind. I think it might have been due to the notion that they had so much trouble capturing any photographic proof of the creature, even when it was in plain sight. But there is plenty of documented wildlife out there that is also very challenging to photograph, even by professionals. Sure, they're not quite as challenging, but if there are very few of these dogman roaming this earth, it's understandable why it's no easy task.
There you have it, folks. I hope you all enjoyed the early morning, middle of the night bonus upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. I'd like to thank you for supporting the channel. It is your support that helps this channel to continue to grow and go. and what gives us all a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free. Everyone is simply treated with the respect that we deserve. Stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. Keeping an eye on our children, the most precious gift we are gifted, our pets, the greatest alarm system we could ever have, and our family and friends, the ones that mean the most to us. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless you all.